beyond all the pageantry and the like, you should apologize. No, like this should be hopefully something that provokes actual systemic change, as in maybe we should investigate the fact that there are 138 other potential mass graves across this country. I mean, if we can just do it via satellite photos, why don't we check out a couple more of those, see how many more are there? Why don't we start trying to do some reconciliation and some reparations to the families who lost their kids and were told and lied to that their kids just ran away. They did not run away. They were murdered. They were murdered by the fucking Canadian government. So that seems like a pretty big thing. I'm sure everyone's been following the news about the residential school system in Canada and the shocking revelation of the 215 kids buried underneath one of the residential schools. That's one of 139 residential schools across the entirety of the country. So that means that there's probably 138 other mass graves just waiting to be uncovered. The graves have not actually been dug up. It was a satellite imagery photo that allowed us to see underneath. That's how they found out about the mass grave. But there's still a lot of controversy going on in Canada about whether or not they should spend the money, because it would be extremely expensive, to dig up all the bodies, dig up all the bones, and then try and identify the children for their parents' sake. There's a lot of controversy over who is to blame. Obviously, Canada is starting to fire a lot of shots at the Catholic Church. Catholic Church and some of the bishops have been firing shots back at Canada. The funny thing is both are to blame. It's the Spider-Man meme, except for this one, it's genocide. The Catholic Church has records, very extensive records, on the nature of these crimes and how far they go. However, the Catholic Church has, again, refused to provide any of those records and make them public for very obvious reasons. We're talking about probably the largest pedophile ring in human history, and they've been covering that up successfully forever. They've never really seen serious charges or crimes as part of their pedophilic network. And on top of which, the residential school system of Canada was a very large part of that pedophile network. A lot of the children were systematically raped and tortured by Catholic priests. So once again, that's part of the entire, let's just say, rich mosaic of horrors that comes from the Catholic Church. But anyways, the Pope did issue a statement, so we'll play his statement now.
Pope Francis said on Sunday that he was pained by the discovery of the remains of 215 children at a former Catholic school for Indigenous students in Canada, and called for the respect of the rights and cultures of native peoples. But during his weekly blessing at St. Peter's Square, Francis stopped short of the direct apology some Canadians had demanded. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said this week the Catholic Church must take responsibility for its role in running many of the schools. Francis urged Canadian political and Catholic religious leaders to cooperate with determination, to shed light on the finding and to seek reconciliation and healing. And he prayed for Canada's Indigenous families. The residential schools operated between 1831 and 1996 and were run on behalf of the government, mostly by the Catholic Church. The schools forcibly separated about 150,000 children from their homes. Many were subjected to abuse, rape and malnutrition in what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015 called cultural genocide. The discovery last month of the remains of the children at the Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia, which closed in 1978, has reopened wounds for survivors of the system. Francis has in the past apologised for the Church's role in colonialism in the Americas, but he has mostly chosen to make direct apologies while visiting countries and talking to native peoples. And no papal visit to Canada is scheduled.
Yeah, well, of course. So, the official statement: I join the Canadian bishops and the whole Catholic Church in Canada in expressing my closeness to the Canadian people who have been traumatized by shocking discovery of the remains of 215 children, pupils at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. Expressing my closeness to the Canadian people. I don't know if no one told whoever runs the Pope's Twitter account that it was the Canadian people that did the crimes. So, what the ever-loving fuck are you trying to say? Because this one's really bad. Indigenous leaders and school survivors dismissed Pope Francis' expressions of pain at the discovery of 215 children at the remains of former Catholic residential school in Canada, saying the church needed to do more. In his weekly blessing, Francis said he was pained by the news about the former school's Indigenous students, but called for respect for the rights and cultures of Native people. But he stopped short of a direct apology some Canadians had demanded. How hard is it for the Pope to say, "I'm very sorry for the way our organization treated First Nations people, the First Nations students, during those times. We are sorry, we pray." That would be the start, because that's pretty much the beginning of reconciliation, right? But how about reparations? That would be a nice thing. Reparations for the, years and years and years of systemic torture and abuse. The discovery at the Kamloops Indian Residential School reopened old wounds in Canada about the lack of information and accountability around the residential school system, which was forcibly separating Indigenous children from their families. Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau said the church must take responsibility for its role in the schools, but declined further comments. I mean, to their credit, the Canadian government has taken responsibility for the complicity, but they've also spent hundreds of millions of dollars fighting survivors of residential schools in court, which is also pretty terrible. Yesterday was the Canadian Grammys, aka the Junos, which I wouldn't be talking about other than the fact that the very opening of it was pretty powerful. I'll play that for 2 seconds.
The recent discovery of even more remains of residential school Indigenous children, this time in Kamloops. It's shocking to some people and a revelation, but it's not news to Indigenous people. The genocide basic to this country's birth is ongoing, and we need to face it together. And I ask for your compassion. Kichimigwech, kinanas komitin. The recent
Really, really good opener. Let me just turn this down. Probably way too loud. How am I now? Hello. So I have to turn that up a lot. So apparently what she says at the end that means thank you a lot. I'm grateful to you in Cree. And that's Buffy Sainte-Marie. If you don't know Buffy Sainte-Marie, she makes a lot of really badass music. Has been like a Canadian musical icon for a while. So it was pretty cool to see her getting the floor there.
Thousands of Canadians marched on Sunday calling for action after the discovery of hundreds of children's remains at a Catholic residential school for Indigenous students last month. Demonstrators chanted and played drums in cities like Toronto, some dressed in Indigenous clothing. The remains of over 200 Indigenous children were found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia in May. Although the school closed in 1978, it was part of a system that forcibly separated Indigenous children from their homes. One protester was a former student at the Kamloops school.
We got to call on the government, but also our allies and our settlers on this land need to educate themselves on the histories of Canada. That's why we stand together today for this message, to bring back our ancestors that are buried.
Most residential schools were run by the Catholic Church on behalf of the government. Although on Sunday, Pope Francis said he was pained by the news and called for the respect of Native peoples, he stopped short of a direct apology that some Canadians have called for.
So it was initially run by the Catholic Church, but eventually it was taken over by the government of Canada, and that's where you kind of got the increase in numbers around the 60s, also known as the 60s scoop, in which they were literally scooping up children from their parents. So I'm sure some of you have seen this pretty badass moment. The Egerton Ryerson statue was ripped down. A statue of Egerton Ryerson at Ryerson University, which was pulled down early Sunday evening by demonstrators, will not be restored or replaced, the university said. A statement from the university's president, Mohamed Lachemi, said that the statue was pulled down by truck an hour after demonstrators honoring residential school victims ended at 6 p.m. The question of the statue was only one of many being considered by the Standing Strong Mashko Wika Powin task force, whose mandate includes consideration of the university's name, responding to the legacy of Egerton Ryerson and other elements of the memorandum on the campus. Their work is more important than ever. I ask our community to respect their work and engage with them as we should engage with all matters of our university. The statue, which has long been a flashpoint of controversy over the educator's influential role in designing the Canadian residential school system. He was one of the architects one of the architects of the residential school system, and also one of the people who laid out the key points that were going to be used, such as that we needed to erase the, quote, Indian within in order to civilize the savage people and remove their ancient culture from them in order to make them better Christian Canadians.
Canada's residential school system has reached a boiling point at Ryerson University. A statue of the school's namesake was toppled on Sunday, and it was part of a rally honoring 215 children whose remains were found at a former residential school in British Columbia less than 2 weeks ago. With more on the story, Marianne Demain joins us from Ryerson University. Good morning to you, Marianne. Can you tell us more about what happened and how the university is responding?
Hi, good morning, Candice. Well, a lot of people waking up this morning, walking down Gould Street at Ryerson, really surprised to see this image here. They've gotten so used to seeing that statue of Egerton Ryerson up on that podium, but this morning it is not there. Last night it was toppled over. In a statement, the university said while they're happy no one was injured, they have no plans to fix that statue or even replace it.
Boom, baby.
And this video was posted online showing the moment the statue came crashing down onto Gould Street on the Ryerson campus. This happened at around 7 o'clock last night, about an hour after a demonstration wrapped up.
He said it ended up in the harbor. After the statue of Egerton Ryerson on the university campus was toppled, protesters took it to Toronto Harbor, where it was thrown in. It released a statement saying the statue will not be restored or replaced. Fuck this guy. Oh, that's amazing.
Here, that demonstration actually started at Queen's Park to remember all of the victims of residential schools and ended with a sit-in at Ryerson University and ended with that statue coming down. Now, the issue of the statue of Egerton Ryerson, as well as the name of Ryerson University, has been the center of controversy for many years because of Ryerson's role in designing the residential school system in Canada. But of course, those calls grew even stronger after the bodies of 215 children were found buried at a former residential school in Kamloops, BC. Now, the big question is what happens next? Well, Ryerson University in a statement did say that their task force, it's called Standing Strong, it's been mandated to not only look into the issue of the Egerton Ryerson statue, but also his legacy and what happens with the name of this university. Already, many people dropping Ryerson from the university's title. When referencing it, they're now using X University. We also know publications here on campus have all...
That actually sounds pretty badass. Where do you go to school? Oh, I go to school X. Yeah, that's right, bro. X marks the spot. I wouldn't mind going to school X. A Canadian Archbishop is speaking out about comments made by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about the Catholic Church's involvement in the residential school system. Speaking on CTV News on Sunday, Cardinal Thomas Collins, the Archbishop at the Antidiocese of Toronto, said the comments made by Trudeau, who has called for the release of the records related to the former residential school in Kamloops, where 215 children remain, was unfair. I think it's much more helpful, as we're working on this long journey of reconciliation together, to not be making these kind of unfair attacks upon those who are trying their best to bring about the work of all Indigenous people for reconciliation. Trudeau said on Friday the church needs to step up and take responsibility. That's what was considered unfair. That's what was considered too much. If you're like, step up and take responsibility. Fighting words there, Trudeau. What are you trying to do? You know? Yeah, come on. You need a diploma. X gonna give it to you. Oh, see, it writes itself. It writes itself. Oh, Thoughtslurm is here. Hi, Thoughtslurm. How are you? All in. Disgusting non-apology from the Pope. That's absolutely ridiculous. And beyond this, beyond all the pageantry and the like, you should apologize. No, like this should be hopefully something that provokes actual systemic change, as in maybe we should investigate the fact that there are 138 other potential mass graves across this country. I mean, if we can just do it via satellite photos, why don't we check out a couple more of those, see how many more are there? Why don't we start trying to do some reconciliation and some reparations to the families who lost their kids and were told and lied to that their kids just ran away. They did not run away. They were murdered. They were murdered by the fucking Canadian government. So that seems like a pretty big thing, to acknowledge and to help, because this, again, I know people always push back on this when I tweet this out. is an ongoing genocide, as in it has not finished, as in there are still fucked up things that are happening every single day to Indigenous people to try and eliminate them off the face of the earth, including things like shoving IUDs in 10-year-old Indigenous girls. So that's fucked up. That happens now. That's not something of our troubled past. That's a present problem. So again, that's what this all comes down to. This all boils down to you can't have this idea of like, well, the land back is very offensive to me because I was born here. Like, what are you saying? Go back to Europe? No, I'm not saying go back to Europe. All right. We understand that there's multiple people living in this area, but there's also an ongoing genocide of one unique peoples in this country, and for that reason and that reason alone, I think there's a very strong argument to be made towards giving them land back, giving them autonomy, and not making them be subject to this anymore. Wouldn't a lot of the people who worked at these places still be alive as well? Well, that's the other thing. There could be mass investigations. There are thousands of teachers, of nuns, of Catholic priests who are still alive today, still living comfortable lives in Canada, who should be persecuted for their crimes against humanity, who should be persecuted for beating kids, who should be persecuted for raping kids, who should be persecuted for torturing children. That should just not be something that goes to pass. Like, does anyone get sad for old Nazis who live in Argentina? And like, well, he's like 80 years old though, okay? I mean, sure, he marched a couple people off to the gas chambers, but at the end of the day, I mean, he's 80 now. He's just living a retired life in Argentina. So should we really persecute? Should we chase them down? Should we find out? Like, yes, absolutely. You know, prosecuted, yes, prosecuted, not persecuted. True, good distinction. Good, yes. I mean prosecuted. Yeah. Sorry. Well, they should be persecuted to be prosecuted. How about that? Persecuted to be prosecuted. There. That'll be how I leave that one.
Hey, do you like movies? Do you like Serfs? Do you want movies and Serfs watching the movies? So then come over to the new channels. It's the Serfs Cinema. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like, just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks why do older generations believe the things they believe, one of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our God, Xander Corvus, we shall build ornate temples in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, and the Tim Caucus, we aim to be the best court jesters your money can buy. To our lords, Evan Nudie, Trevor R., Alexander Thaler, Ryan Lubin, Tofox, Jeff Lamb, Sint Forzy, we are your humble vassals, ready to till your land. To our Knights of the Round Table, Omni, Mr. Anderson, Riley and Anna, Ryan Craig, Multimondi, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophoja, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, The Great Houdini, Bo and Jenny, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Jay Fraser Cartwright, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Yopi, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Constance Joyce Lacheris. We raise our glass of mead and we salute you.